This is Kevin with Dell Technologies, and Kathy, I don't think she's going to be able to join. If she does, it might be a little bit late. So we'll
Okay.
definitely start solo without her, and
So Kevin, why
hopefully she
don't
can make
you introduce yourself, please? And Jeff, you've already been introduced, but you can add a little more to it if you want.
Absolutely. So Kevin Adams, I'm Director of Content and Site Operations for Dell Services, which focuses primarily on the Dell.com support website, but we also work very much with our services organization as a whole. I've been at Dell for 26 years, or quite a long time, and my team focuses a lot on knowledge management, content management, search, and a lot of our CX and UX components of our support applications.
And for those of you that haven't met me before, I'm Jeff Greer. I'm a content strategy consultant, and I work with a lot of clients in the support and marketing space. And I was really happy to be able to judge the Dell site this year. It's a really impressive example of a support experience, and I've got a lot of nice things to say about it. Al, do you want us to start at 2:05, or should we get started now?
Was that question directed at me?
No, that was for Al.
Oh, okay.
Well, I think we're ready to get started then.
Good.
Let me pull up my...
Sorry, no need to wait for me. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just I thought we said 2:05 on the schedule. I just wanted to make sure we weren't holding for anybody else.
Well, we're hoping that maybe Kathy Berke from Dell will join us, but Kevin said she'd be late. So go ahead.
Yep. Yeah, she has a conflict she could not get out of, but she'll hopefully be able to join here a little bit later.
Okay. Bear with me, everybody. I'm going to have to quit and reopen. I'm going to have to quit and reopen Teams so that it can record my browser. Be right back.
Yeah, I had a similar problem. I got knocked off, and when I came back, it doesn't let me see Q&A because of the way I came in, which we'll try to rectify after this presentation. So technology is great, right, Kevin?
Well, I mean, we switch back and forth between Zoom and Teams, and yeah, just depending on your configuration, I get it.
Yeah, well, that's why we all have jobs.
That's right. It keeps changing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jeff, okay this time?
All good. Looks
okay. I'm getting off, and you guys take it away.
Okay, sounds good. As everybody knows, Dell is the winner of the Best Website Award this year. And for those of you that need a refresher, we evaluate sites based on the user experience, the content that they offer, interaction and interactivity, the organization's processes for improving the site, and how they use metrics and analytics. I'm going to go through the Dell support experience in order of how we judged it. And if anybody is interested in asking a question, if you need clarification on something we're talking about, please leave it in the Q&A, and Kevin and I will keep an eye on that. And feel free to ask anything you have a question about. So I think everybody should be able to see my screen right now. One of the things that impressed me the most about Dell's site was the level of maturity, how well organized the content is, how predictive it seemed to be about different kinds of support use cases that I would come to it with, how intuitive the navigation is, and how easy everything is to find. I think it's easy when you get here to understand what option do I need, and how do I get there? And even if I don't know exactly what product I might be looking for, the site really guides me through through finding the right answer for my use case. I'm really curious in hearing from Kevin about the process that Dell uses to manage the homepage, and particularly the information architecture navigation, which, bear with me for a second, I accidentally clicked away. You know, if you look under support, you've got a lot of items here. You've got a very extensive amount of information down the page. Kevin, can you talk a little bit about how your team manages this and what kind of inputs and data you use?
Absolutely. So let's just start with what's on the page and maybe the structure and order. We do two types of areas of both research and analysis. We certainly have a usability and research team. So anytime we're going to put anything on here, we're going to typically run it by some kind of UX research. We have taxonomists. That's another important feature. So we have multiple taxonomists that look at not just taxonomy at the individual discrete system level, you know, how we tag and attribute our content, but the layout of the site, the structure of the site, the logical units, we refer to our customer journeys. That's another way. So there's a lot of research in UX design that's done up front. The second part, though, really comes into the analytics. Most of the things you'll see from the top all the way down to the second layer to the third layer is built upon the common journey. So take, for example, your recently viewed product, right? We come back in right there in the middle of this is where you left off. That's probably where you want to go next. So we want to have a link right into our product support. Drivers and diagnostics is one of the most common use cases we get, right? So between drivers being about 33%, diagnostics being about 15% of the time customers will come, we want to be able to offer the ability to jump right in and guide you through kind of a guided solution to get your latest drivers. Or diagnostics is really just a one-click button to scan your system and find problems and try to resolve them if you can without having to read a knowledge base article and video, kind of these one-click actions. So they're very successful when they're able to identify things. And then as you work your way kind of across the right, service requests, people looking up the status of their dispatches, the support services are things like your warranty, your entitlements. Some of our self-repair options also exist in there, and then order support. And then as you move further down the page, again, you'll see multiple ways to identify your product. The best way actually is when you have a Dell product, it will auto-detect it right there at the top. So that's usually our best solution. Come in and auto-detect your system to get you right to your product support. But if you scroll down the page just a little bit, you'll see some additional options. You can search for the name of your product. You can have recently viewed, or in some cases, if you're an enterprise customer, you'll have that, see where it says my products, where it's locked in, and it'll ask you to sign in. But if you have multiple products, that's how you can kind of click through your list of products and do it. So we give you different ways to do it, and each of these have varying levels of, you know, which way is going to be the best way to go. But we find the auto detect is the least effort, which we like to do, particularly for our client customers. And then again, as you go further down, you'll see focus areas like our support libraries. This is where we put a lot of our FAQs. Videos is another area. We created a separate landing page for videos. We have our community, which hopefully everybody knows community is successful to the overall supportability of your the support experience. And then we have our documentations and manuals. And then finally, we go down to the very bottom, you're going to see the last few bits that we have in there, really more on the IT and infrastructure side. And you might even ask, why do we have our IT stuff, our infrastructure stuff buried at the bottom? And the reason for that is most people that come in, about 85%, are going to come in and use this, what we call unsigned in. We call it a cold state. If you logged in your enterprise customer, you're going to get all your enterprise tools listed up at the top. So this page is very dynamic. It can look 6 different ways depending on who you are when you sign in.
So can you talk a little bit about people using the open version of the site versus logging in, and yep. Are there different success rates with that, and do you notice different habits in where people go and what they do?
Absolutely. Maybe let's work backwards to some of the questions you asked. We do find that the customer satisfaction and the self-service rate is higher when you get into a more signed-in experience. And that's across the board. We have a signed-in experience for client customers. We have a signed-in experience for enterprise customers. And there's really two reasons for that. In some cases, there's only special features and content you can get access to once you fully disclose who you are. You know, there's some fraud requirements, there's some PI requirements kind of embedded behind that. So, you know, one of those examples right there is that services management and analytics for IT infrastructure, what we call My Service 360. It's a fleet management tool, and it's a great tool to be able to use, but you have to tell us who you are so you're not, you know, exposing yourself to other people's products. So people love it, they use it, it works great, but it's a very specific solution for a very specific type of customer. So again, if you sign in, or even if you allow us to auto detect your product, which is what we call kind of a warm state, both of those are going to be more successful than a cold state. A second part of that makes it very successful is the recommendations. We will provide, if you actually go back up a little bit in the middle, you're going to see these knowledge base articles, right? These become more intelligent and dynamic as we know who you are, what problem you're trying to solve, and what your product is. So you will find these recommendations that are featured on the product support page, embedded within our actual articles and other areas of the site, and they are going to be more dynamic. And in fact, I think we have Aditya Kulkarni is going to be talking tomorrow about AI from Dell. This is one of those things that his team helped build to deliver on our support side. So it's just going to be more targeted. It's going to have a better chance of getting you what you need without even having to ask for it sometimes, which is actually very, very relevant. And then I think one of the questions you also asked is what is kind of that breakdown in experience? So about maybe about 12 or 13% of the time our customers are going to sign in. About 60% of the time though, we're going to auto detect the tag. So that means about 30% of the time you come in and you're going to have just the current experience that you're seeing right now.
Terrific. Kevin, what are the top destination pages? Where do people generally come into the site? And are there different habits for people who have bookmarked areas of the site, people coming in through Google, people coming in from various transactional emails?
So great question. Let's kind of start at the top, which is off domain. We talk about Google, Baidu, Bing, and others. We're very heavily SEO optimized as a company. I think right now we're looking at about 65 to 66% of our customers are going to start their journey from Google. So it's quite high. And typically when they do that, they're going to land on content more often than not. So it's going to be articles, videos, manuals. Sometimes it might be a driver too, though. So drivers are still pretty well optimized. The more dynamic parts, like it's not going to drop you in the middle of a diagnostic, for example, right? Because that's something you have to start at the beginning. But you might land on the diagnostics landing page. So a lot of customers are starting directly from Google, which is good because we also see that as a key enabler for the AI LLM bots of the future, right? They have to see your site and your content in order to provide answers into Chat GPT and you know, all those other tools that are emerging. So being able to see and crawl your site, we think is really important across the board, and we continue to drive that up even higher than the current 65% range. Now, once you're on the site, there's a couple of journeys that I think you'll see, and I talked on them a little bit, but content pages makes about 39% of all visits. And there are so many ways to get to them. I mean, you do have search, which you can do. You have search in the middle of the page. You have search at the top of the page. So lots of customers will do a search. Drivers, we talked about it. So you have that update drivers button, or if you click on that latitude 7275 link there, right in the image, you'll see these. This is what we call our product support page. This is kind of everything that's put together for your product. So if you were to go to drivers and downloads, that's about 33% of our visits that we have. And again, there's two ways you can do this. By default, the best experience is going to be to scan your system, just give you the latest that you need. And that is a pretty common use case. But for enterprise customers, for example, you're not going to be on your server when you come to our support site. So we also have the ability to manually look at all the different drivers that are out there and decide based upon, your OS, your components, what you want to do. But that is by far, if I look at content and drivers, that's about 65, almost 70% of all our use cases. The third one, if you actually click on the next tab, is diagnostics. So that's makes up about 15% of all the visits that we have. And again, it's very great if it can detect a problem and proactively, fix it for you, right? It could be firmware updates, it can be system optimizations, all kinds of things. But there are times that it's going to say, hey, I don't detect any particular error too, right? So not every diagnosis is going to find a problem. But if you say, hey, what is your problem? It will continue troubleshooting, maybe on configuration issues you have that still, system is slow is a great example. It's one of the top things we get all the time. Well, you can still not have an error, but your system still will be slow, right? You're not wrong. It's just not that there's an error that can be resolved through some kind of diagnostic. So we'll run you through kind of the top fixes and journeys that you can do that could be.
So Kevin, I wanted to kind of go a little bit deeper into one space. We had talked about selecting your system, and you had talked about different taxonomists and information architects. Like, how do those teams? I imagine you must have different people responsible for different product lines, and you probably have different people responsible for different pieces of content. How does your team connect all the dots and make sure that everybody's working off the same vision?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think so let's talk about the taxonomy for a minute, because it's our taxonomy is a little more structured and governed. So anytime we're going to introduce a new product, and this happens from the sales side, we have a process that we use to make sure there's support and service readiness for it. So we have people within our services organization, also within our sales and marketing team, that align on what the product's going to be called, where it's going to be structured in the taxonomy. And actually, I can show you an example of that. If you click the change product link that up there at the top under the image, and scroll down, and yes, click on the browse all products right there on the right. This is where we spend a lot of time around a taxonomy perspective. So it'll be aligned under computers, electronic software infrastructure. You can click, for example, under computers, which is where we put our laptops and our desktops. And then these categories, right? You have different type of second level, third level, et cetera. And so we spend a lot of time from a central governance perspective of deciding where these things are going to sit. And that's all the way at the sales level, right? So you can, you're welcome to pick any one of those, or you can close it out. So that's part of it. And that's a fairly centralized process. So I think there's less ambiguity, and it works pretty well, I would say, from a what products are available and how do customers find them. Now, when we talk about the things like our drivers, our diagnostics, and documentation, and that's probably the best one where we get it. When we start getting into the knowledge base articles we're going to have and things like that, we really break up in two groups. So under our services organization, we have a client group and we have an enterprise group. And the client group works kind of very much as like I'll call it a single unit. Many of the laptops, the desktops in our workstations share a lot of commonality, both in the platform itself, the components, the operating systems that they have. So they tend to have if you're running a Windows system, there are just Windows things that are going to be very common occurrence things you're going to have, whether it's, updating latest version Windows, how do I do something? Maybe people have heard of Copilot, right? Copilot just launched, and there's people asking all kinds of questions about what this is and how do I use it. So we can roll out those types of answers very easily across kind of the client group as a whole. And that makes it a little bit easier to say for large numbers of systems, laptops, and desktops, I can kind of answer that question. So we have kind of one single group we interface with around our call drivers, and then the solutions to those call drivers that exist within that business unit. On the enterprise side, it's honestly, it's a lot more complex because you have servers, storage, networking, security, software, and it goes on and on, cloud, it goes on and on and on. So for each of those products, it's almost like their own group that we work with, right? So where CSG, it's kind of all one group where we work together on it. In our enterprise space, we really focus a lot on the individual product.
Okay, terrific. I don't see any questions about the user experience. I think this has been a great overview. I'd like to transition into the kind of content that you offer.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, some of the things we look for are a variety of content types, you know, having kind of a minimal content offering, multilingual content support, accessibility, and portability. And by portability, we really mean the ability to kind of save and use content outside of the .com.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the feedback we received from the judges is that the content is really well organized around both hardware and driver support. And, you know, if we go to the navigation, we can see the list of content types here, right? We've got articles and videos, warranty information, drivers and downloads, manuals, diagnostics, self-repair, service requests, support orders, and then contact and community. That's exceptionally thorough and seems complete. What I'm kind of curious in talking about is how your teams prioritize the creation of different content. I know a lot of it will come out of technical and sales documentation.
Yep.
But when something seems to be you know, arising as an issue through call centers and other sources, how do you identify that? You're going to create content, the type of content you create, and then how do you get that original piece of content into your other types?
All right. So let's actually start with the first part of your statement that you brought up, which is product readiness. So there is that kind of product's going to be launched, and we have to get things out there. That's when you're going to see your user guides, your tech specs, all the things that a customer typically will need to, you know, get started. Actually, if you click there and get started with your Dell, that's a great example. And I mean, it's going to be all the things like registering your device, getting a Dell account, installing Support Assist for kind of proactive maintenance, the videos around how to unbox and things like that. So those are things that happen kind of at the very beginning, you know, but before there's even a call driver that we're going to have. That even includes finding your service tag, right? In order to contact us, your best experience is going to be if you can provide us your service tag. So we spent a lot of details around just you're about to get a brand new product, what to expect. That's going to be things like emails you'll get. And of course, we're going to install software in the box and things like that. It's going to kind of tell you what we need to do to get started. But then there's what happens after that, which is really the second part of your question. And those go into what we call our call drivers. And there's two areas where I can talk about that. One is we do get a lot of the data from the CRM. You know, we look at what are the Paretos of issues that we have, and then what is the mapping of the content, meaning it could be an existing call driver, but for a new product, maybe we need to tag an existing, this is where we get to taxonomy. Maybe we need to tag an existing video or knowledge base article or white paper or FAQ for that new product, which will cause it to show up and render for customers. So that's one way we do it. But it could also be a new and emerging issue. So the CRM with the call data can be used, but also our community actually is a great source of that information too. So we do the same thing. We have a platform we use that gets us information on the types of calls and questions that customers are having within the community, and those can eventually turn into a knowledge base article or something else. Now, the second part of the question you asked around that is how do you decide what you're going to do? And I can tell you 9 out of 10 times it's going to be a knowledge base article. And there's two reasons for that. One, it's just very easy, right? We have enabled all of our agents to be able to create articles, but we also have some expert authoring groups that will use it too. So, you know, you can publish an article in hours if you need to. And so it's just very fast and it's very easy and it's flexible. But sometimes we find the format and structure, what you need to do with a knowledge base article is a little restrictive, right? Maybe you want to be able to embed certain videos and graphics and you want to make more of a guided experience. That's where you'll find more of these web pages we have, which are like our FAQs on the support library. And so when you go to the support library, you're going to find more imagery. You're going to find, easier to consume sets of information. These are what we call our top journeys, right? So for our top journeys, we want it to be simple, easy to follow, maybe probably looking at it, making sure it's gone through a second set of eyes, maybe like a content creator, a UX person, things like that. Is it SEO optimized, things like that. So it kind of we'll go through that second round of review to make it very simple and put out there. But those are the two things. And then I will say one thing we do at the tail end of when a product is about to go end of service life, we look at all the analytics, the call drivers that were done, and if there's going to be a revision to that product, maybe we're going to come out with, similar platform, but maybe some new processors and video cards and things on it. We look at what those call drivers are, and then we try to build that into the next user guide and manual too.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to take our serviceability information and build in the product. Sometimes we don't even want to build it into documentation. We want to actually change the product so this issue doesn't come up. So there's a lot of ways that we feed our serviceability information back into our product group as well to build a better product the next time around.
Terrific. I wanted to talk about multilingual support.
Yep.
And kind of just scrolling through your menu, you can see the complexity.
Yep.
And flexibility here. And can you talk a little bit about how much of your content is translated for how many languages and how you generate those translations?
Yep. So first we'll start off with there are certain languages that we're required to do kind of by local law. In particular, when we talk about a lot of our user guides and documentation. So I believe with user guides and documentation, the number of languages we cover, I think, is in the probably less than 100, more than 60, somewhere in that range. So it's quite a bit. And then there's what we call our standard package of tier 1s and tier 2s and tier 3s we do. And that typically goes more into about the 27, I think is what we're looking at right now, languages that we'll do on that too. And there's kind of two processes we go through. For most knowledge base articles, we've actually started doing 100% machine at the point of creation. So, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One, the quality we've seen in the last couple of years where we're actually using AI now as a part of our translation processes. It will tell you the success rate of if you do it, what to expect, how good it will be.
Mm-hmm.
It will give you a recommendation, even whether or not you should or shouldn't do machine, but what's the quality you can expect and things like that. So we're not actually doing a pure AI translation, but we're using it with our existing processes, which uses a neural machine translation process, which is actually the quality in most cases we still find is better than AI translation. So we're using neural MT, and we have the ability to take pretty much any kind of page or asset that we have from the point of creation in English, send it back and get it back pretty quickly. It could be, hours, could be a day, but it's really fast. So that's going to be the default process everything's going to pretty much go through. Now we do have we have two other types of processes we follow. We have what we call a post-edit process and a pure human translation process. Post-edit might be if we look at something where maybe there's questions or concerns about the quality, we're going to run it back through again. And post-edit does kind of like what you do with machine, but then after it goes through the machine, it gets checked kind of by a human translator still. And they'll override certain things like the term, the sequencing, things like that, things that just don't sound natural maybe or something like that. And so maybe about like 15 or 20% of what we produce is going to go through that. Almost everything that's in what we call our high volume content pages and things like that will always go through a post-edit process. And then things that absolutely have to be 100% right, maybe for legal reasons, will go through 100% human translation. So those are the kind of 3 tiers we do, but
Mhm.
we just really shifted to doing 100% machine as a start, maybe about a year and a half ago, because of the quality has improved so greatly very recently.
So is that built into your content digital workflow?
It
Do
is.
content creators just hit a button and translation happens?
It used to be. So it used to be hit a button. We actually have even automations that just picks it up, throws it in the queue, and does it. So we don't have to hit the button anymore. It just flows all the way through from beginning to end.
Okay, terrific. Terrific. The next piece we want to move to is interaction and interactivity. And this is around the interaction required for feedback, forums, support cases, chat, what the escalation process looks like, how people can escalate content to attract interaction. We'll talk about search. We'll talk about site search versus Google search and rich snippets, and any kind of offline or public access to content. Is there a place we should go specifically to talk about? Can we go to the service request section?
Sure.
Do you want to talk a little bit about how that works and how that's integrated into the process?
Sure. So you can click off, you can start off here exactly like you did. And in this case, you're either going to have to choose your model, or you're going to have to enter a service tag. So I tell you what, go ahead and click on choose a model and click computers. Let's go to laptops. We'll choose an XPS. And let's go to XPS 13. And let's choose the 139380 or something kind of like that.
93, did you say 9310 or 9300?
Any of those will fine, actually. Pick any of them, they're fine. You select your product. Okay, so the first and most important thing we ask you to do is provide your product. Now, in this case, right, it's going to prompt you for the service tag. And you might ask why. Because you can route to different queues based upon the product and the service tag you want. So we're definitely going to encourage you, but we don't require it. In fact, if you look right below that section, you can say, you can close that out.
Yep.
You can see how it says I don't have it. And maybe you don't know, maybe you're not in front of it. So the next step in this process is identifying the issue. And there's 2 parts to this. Let's do video display issues. Go ahead and click on the first one. 2 things are going to happen here. One, we're going to give you some self-help content related to that category. But the other thing is, based on the complexity of what you selected, we're going to recommend different channels you should use based upon the issue you selected. So go ahead and click on next. So in this case, we're saying your best chance is first to just run a test, and you can do that. But if you scroll down, you'll see some additional options, right? Again, we're recommending a service tag. We can't necessarily tell you exactly what you need to do until you can provide us that service tag and some self-help options and things like that. So that's one experience you can do. Of course, we offer many other channels. If you had entered a service tag, you would get the ability to chat, you'd get a phone number, you'd get an email, something we called service requests online. It's kind of like a form-based ticketing system. You'll have our virtual assistant or digital concierge. We have social media. We've got, anywhere from like 9 to 10 different channels you can engage with. But each of those are going to require a service tag to really give you the best channel. So that goes into kind of the service request piece. Any questions on that?
I don't see any in the Q&A.
Yep. Okay. Let's go to support in the masthead, and then go ahead and go to the home page for a minute. And then if you scroll down to the middle, you're going to actually see some recommended, articles here. So click on any of those. Doesn't matter which one. And scroll down to the bottom. So there's ability for you to provide also content-related feedback. So if you look on this page, you can give a rating. Is it accurate? Is it useful? Is it easy to understand? Is it helpful? And then comments and suggestions. Every one of these that comes in is looked at, and the ratings are in, and whether or not it's helpful is used for our content improvement programs. Like if we see something that's getting rated, low accuracy or just flat out wasn't helpful, we're going to look and investigate. But the comments customers provide, this is a great place for them to be able to tell us. Sometimes they're very explicit. This step here was wrong. You need to fix it or update it. Or they might even say, I need help. This didn't work for me. So then we can transfer that over into a service request ticket for them too.
So this automatically generates a service request ticket is
it can. It can.
Okay.
We'll need the service tag. So sometimes if they provided their email, we can go back and say, oh, I can help you with this. Can you provide me your service tag? And then we can then create a ticket for them, things like that.
I do want to go back to this when we talk about metrics and analytics. I'm curious about how your team uses the different, I've seen versions of this form that are very simple. Well, yes. We're here. We might as well talk about it now.
Sure.
I've seen versions of this form that are very simple. Can you talk a little bit about how your team uses the different information? You don't just have a yes or no, but accurate, useful, right. Easy to understand. How does that help them analyze the data?
Yeah, great question. It can be subtle because oftentimes a customer will rate it all 1-star, all 5-star, regardless of the designations we put in here. But the one I think that is most important on here is actually, was this article helpful, yes or no? Mm-hmm. We tend to see a high correlation. If it's a no, then they're going to usually create a service request. If it's a yes, then typically it'll be self-service. But just because it's yes doesn't still mean that it can't be improved. So accuracy by itself, if we're looking at ratings, and we can do this, we get thousands of these every week. So there's a large amount of data for us to work from. If we see something that is not accurate or the accuracy is low, we'll look at it. We'll send that to a technical SME to go and say, hey, customers are saying this is inaccurate. A lot of times we'll find examples, the steps were written for Windows 10, but the customer has Windows 11. We forgot to add Windows 11 steps or variations in there, right? So that can be very, very useful. I'm going to skip over useful because I'll get back to that one in a minute, but okay. Easy to understand is another one. So another one is like you can have the right answer in there, but customers maybe don't know how to do it. And this is where easy to understand. It might be written too technical or it doesn't have enough steps. So there's two things we'll do on that. We actually use a really great tool in a lot of our writing called acrolinks. And what it allows us to do is a couple of things. One, we can conform it to kind of the Dell standards, the glossary, and the brand. It actually has a very great feature in there called the Fleisch reading score, which allows us to see what level that something was written for. We often find a correlation that the higher the level, let's say it was written for like 11th or 12th grade, we want to actually take a very common question, take it down to 6th grade level. That's our goal, right? And even lower if we can. Sometimes you can't. But we see a strong correlation that if this is on the high end, that it's been written pretty well. If it's on the low end, there's opportunities just to improve kind of the writing style. And then useful. We find useful and helpful to literally be the same answer. so we skip that one, to be perfectly honest. We just look at, was this article helpful?
Okay.
So probably an opportunity to streamline that question out or maybe ask something different. But those are the 3 ratings we actually use on here.
Okay, great. I'd like to kind of back up a little and talk about I know we've talked about the use case for search. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to rehash that information, but can you talk a little bit about rich snippets?
Sure. Actually,
search and how that interacts, how that has affected your experience.
Absolutely. Once you do this for me, scroll up to the very top and then just type in slow performance. And if you scroll down just a little bit, you're going to see that snippet. This is an AI-generated snippet, and it's pretty cool for a couple of reasons. This is something we launched in January of this year, and we started piloting it maybe just in 10% of the population to see how it performed. And on average, we found out it performed about 15 to 20% better. And there were two main takeaways we took from it. One is customers had to search less over and over again. And 2, when they performed the steps in there, it was just quicker. They resolved their question quicker. So they spent less time looking for things. And the reason for that is it has the ability to combine information from multiple sources in kind of a single solution, which if you use any kind of chat GPT or Google, it's the same thing, right? It's combining information from sources. So yeah, you're spending less time hunting and pecking and more time just resolving, which is great. So this is something that we just launched. We rolled it out very quickly to 100% into English. We're right in the middle of rolling this out into other languages. We launched French maybe a month ago. We'll be launching more European languages shortly and then switching over to APJ. So again, less time repeat searching. We're having better click-through rates, less time spent on having to solve your answer, and higher CX. I mean, it's pretty much everything we'd want. Now, is it like 50 or 75% better? No, but it's about 20% better. It's a small little thing that I think customers for the most part like. And guess what? If they don't like it, you can actually click that little thumbs down that you see on the AI generated answer. And now we have the ability to target what it is. Yep. Go ahead and choose any one of those options you want. And now you can also add information on why. So we do the same thing with this search experience that we do with articles that we talked about.
I feel bad. I've just jacked up the
that's all right. We'll go back and we'll have to address it. So
before we go to the next thing, how have your customers, your end users responded to having AI answers generated? Has there been pushback? Has there been concern or questions?
Yes, all three. Yes to all three of the questions. In some cases, customers didn't quite know when we first launched this that it was AI generated. If you look at that blue bar where it says AI answer generated for you right above the troubleshooting slow performance title, we added that in just to be extremely clear to your end user that's what it is. And in some cases, we'll have people type something in and they'll give us a thumbs down. And we'll ask them, and this can be both for our employees or our customers, it doesn't matter. We'll any customer, whether they're internal or not, that wants to provide feedback, we appreciate it. But sometimes they'll give us a thumbs down, and they might tell us why, they might not. But we'll reach out to them and say, hey, notice you didn't like it. What were you expecting is the question that we ask. And sometimes they'll just say something like, well, I expected it to do more, to know what problem I was trying to solve. Because again, you can type in the word BIOS and you might, what about BIOS do you want? Do you want to update it? Are you trying to troubleshoot a problem? Do you want to configure it? What specific do you want in there? And that's sometimes the response we get, that they expect it to be better at guessing or anticipating what someone wants, rather than this is truly just taking and summarizing the information that we have, the knowledge that we have. So it's not gonna jump to conclusions. It's gonna work on what it's been trained on. So that's the first thing. The second thing we found, which was not expected, but actually great output, because it does really put this front and center, we were able to kind of expose knowledge gaps sometimes too, right? Someone gives us a thumbs down, and we say, what was happening? You said, I didn't find information on X. Great. Now we push that into our content and knowledge governance processes to quickly turn around and see how we can fill that gap. So those are kind of the two things. But again, for the most part, we have found more people like it than not, because it's not, it's quick and it's smart, but it's not completely changing your experience, right? It's not a chat bot or anything like that. It's just really summarizing information to make it quicker and easier to look for.
So I just wanted to show something to everybody here. I went to Google and did a search for Dell slow performance, so that everybody could see, right, the amount of metadata that's available for somebody to sort through, and the AI overview here. But one thing I'm impressed by is how well Dell is commanding the search results on this first page. You have a majority of things at the top of the page, and we all know that if you're underneath position 3 or 4 on Google, right, you might as well not be there at all. But they've really been able to do a good job with their search strategy, and their content creation so that they're showing up for these searches very well.
Yeah, honestly, SEO has been such a focus for the last at least 5+ years. On my team, we've hired external SEO strategists specifically to tell us what we need to do from a technical perspective in terms of how we create writer content, all the way down to, like you said, we track how many snippets we have, what snippets we have on various products. And then now we've shifted over from snippets to what we call these AI overviews. How many AI overviews are we ranking for? Is it the right things like that too? So we spend a lot of time there because so many customers really start looking from these types of engines. We want to be able to take them to our site because we believe we'll have the best content for them.
Right. Okay, we have a couple of questions. One is, how did you measure the accuracy of AI-generated search suggestions? Is it just thumbs ups, thumbs down, or is there more to it?
Good question. There's 3 criteria used. So thumbs up, thumbs down is something we had. We look at the self-service rate. So basically, did you search and then did you open a ticket? That's another one we look at. So generally, it was the basis for how we actually expanded so quickly from 10% to 100%, and then from 100% English into other languages. We find on average about a 20% deflection more often than not. And then we also look at individual queries. So we don't just do it at the system level, but we can do it at the individual query level. I can say when I type in slow performance, how many thumbs up, thumbs down did I have on that? What was my click-through rate? We still look at traditional metrics too. We look at average click rank, we look at null results, searches per visit, things like that. So we look at all those kind of core search metrics that also exist, but in general, it's going to be kind of the self-service rate, is going to be the thumbs up and thumbs down, and it's also going to be the click-through engagement rate.
There's another question too that takes us back a few minutes, but it's about translation on creation versus doing on-demand translation. Did you make that choice because of legal requirements or accuracy needs? Let me read the question. I want to make sure I'm representing it. I am assuming that not all articles will be accessed in all languages, and there is cost associated with translating and storing translations for all supported languages.
Yes. So there's two reasons that we've switched to kind of on creation, and that's a little more recently. One, the quality of neural machine translation combined with AI has made it really good. It's not perfect, and you can definitely take native speakers sometimes, and we test it. We do retesting constantly by language, but it's become really pretty good to the point where you should just do it. Now, let's talk about the cost, right? The costs have also improved greatly over the last few years of machine translation combined with AI and neural MT. So I think the cost was originally the barrier to entry, and quality was in the second component. But now it's actually flipped the other way around, where cost is no longer the barrier to entry. It's now really around quality. And I can give you some examples. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. We had certain examples where if you're working on an enterprise product, for example, and you have a command line, you have to type in something from a command line. Command line entries are almost always done just in English. You don't want to translate that. It's actually the wrong thing to do. So we had to come up a way that says, oh, when it identifies command lines, don't translate this little snippet, right, and skip over it. That was something we had to implement in that process, right, things like that. So the cost to barrier has gone down greatly. The quality has improved. So those two things alone really made it worth it. The third thing I'll mention, and I think we talked about this a little bit, SEO. If you don't translate something into another language, you miss 100% of that opportunity in any language outside. And again, it's just about maybe 50% overall worldwide comes in from English. That's about 50% we're leaving off the table, and we don't translate it. And because we have so many people searching from search engines, in order to make it so people can find it, it pretty much paid itself off, and then some, as we kind of went to that approach. And we have a very large scale, so the numbers work in our favor in that regard too.
Our next category is your processes for site improvement, which Kevin, you've done a really good job of kind of talking about how you take learnings and execute changes based on what you've learned. Can you talk a little bit about your global council? I think the acronym is KCS, and talk a little bit about how that council is organized and how you engage stakeholders at Dell.
Sure. We've got multiple different councils, and KCS is one of the processes we use for our knowledge creation and governance and optimization. So they're kind of the organization around the creation of knowledge and the management of knowledge. And that will feed into our services organization around the types of issues and call drivers. So we spend a lot of time mapping call drivers to knowledge. And that knowledge, we talk a lot about KB articles, and I think in the industry, in the services industry, that's a pretty popular asset or a content type, but it's not always just that too. Like, when do you need a video? When do you need, something else built into the system or something else? That's where those councils will step outside of just the knowledge to solve it. And we talk a lot about the journeys. So there's a lot of, just because something can be done one way, how do you know what is the right way to do it? And there can be two ways we can do that. Sometimes we just put it out there and we wait and see what the numbers say. And then we go back and react and say, okay, we need to do more, or it's sufficient. But in other cases, we have leveraged what we have learned from other products or other types of similar issues. We say, well, this is the playbook. We create these playbooks for how we do things. Let's leverage playbook B to solve this problem because it's a very similar type of problem. And that playbook requires two KB articles that are cross-linked, one video. We're going to put it on the product page. We're going to put a banner up there for the first 30 days, et cetera. So, it kind of depends if it's a tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 3 issue and what we have learned from kind of our previous learnings of it. So that's a big part of it when we talk about, content and knowledge and things like that. This other part that you're seeing here, just the website design and things, this is where we add the additional UX research. We do different types of testings, for example. We use something called usertesting.com, where we can just put an idea out there, run through card sorts and see what people think. That's a quick and easy way to test things. We do A/B testing. Like we might get 1% of the population to go into one experience and the other into the other. And sometimes we just take an idea, we put it out there, but we measure it very closely. It's almost like an A/B testing, but it's like, hey, we're going to introduce this and see how it goes very quickly. We'll have hourly and daily stand-ups and just see how it's doing. And we might make revisions to it very quickly, iteratively. And it may not be an A/B testing, but it's just heavily monitored along with the KPIs. We have expected outcomes for everything we're going to launch. And so we got to go back and see, are we hitting those outcomes? If something's underperforming, we're going to have, daily setups that those councils will go through and understand, okay, what's the Pareto of failures? What did we miss? Do we make an assumption here that customers will adopt or use this, or that this will be an obvious choice? Maybe there's a use case in there that we didn't account for that we need to go back and add in. So that's yet another way we'll do something like that.
Okay, terrific. Your global council, what level of people and what job titles participate?
Yeah, typically these are going to be our VPs, our senior directors and our directors. And of course, it goes all the way down. Even we can have SMEs down to the individual IC level that will come in, present on a topic or finding. We've got obviously a lot of data science that comes into this. So we have support from our analytics teams. Our research teams will come in depending on what it is. So, but our governance happens really at kind of that VP, director, senior director level.
Okay. Okay, terrific. I'm going to move ahead to metrics and analytics, which is the last area we're going to talk about. And we evaluate organizations on how they cover transactions and content management metrics, kind of the overall site experience, and those questions about, was somebody able to achieve self-service? Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about how you use these metrics for your stakeholders, what you report to whom, and how it helps you manage your business expectations?
Good question. I can tell you, again, I've been at Dell for over 26 years. We measure everything we can measure. And I mean, that goes all the way up to like, Michael Dell. We have all these different scorecards and metrics. So everything we do, we try to make measurable, and we try to make decisions off of, is it working or is it not working? So in our space, our president of services, there's a scorecard that goes out to him, and there's a couple of things that support kind of the website that goes in there. The first one we look at is what we call our self-service rate, and it's a very simple metric. It's, did you go to the website, and then did you open a service request, right? So we measure that metric, and then we report it out at the top level. And of course, we want it to improve all the time. So that's definitely one of our key metrics that we measure, kind of this self-service rate. Did we make it easy for customers to solve and answer their question on their own? Second one, very popular, very important, is our CX surveys, right? And there's a lot of questions that go in there, but it's the standard ones I think most people work off of, which is how satisfied were you with your experience? And that includes, sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Anybody else hear that?
That is a lot of feedback that you are getting.
I think we're
it's
good. I
resolved.
think Al was coming back online because we're just about. I think we're at the last question right now.
Yep.
So,
but
either that or somebody is reminding us that our time is almost up.
That's a great way to do it. And so customer experience, customer satisfaction is a big one, and that includes things like customer effort, ease of use. Did this resolve your question? Things like that. So those are probably our two most important metrics. Were you able to solve this answer on your own, and was that experience good for you?
All right, great. Kevin, I really enjoyed talking to you today and learning more about your processes and how you all manage Dell.com support. And I'm particularly happy that you won the Best Website Award this year.
Thank you.
I hope your team is proud of that achievement.
We're very proud. And we also don't just look at it as the award. The award is great, but the feedback your team has provided helps us, right? We look at feedback as an integral part of success. And there's always things we know we can improve and do better. And my favorite thing is when we hear something we hadn't heard before. So that's always great.
That's terrific. I'm going to turn it over to Al because I think it's time to segue into our next item on the agenda.